Hello and welcome to What the Just Happened Today, your essential guide to the daily shock and awe in national politics. I'm Joe Amditis. Let's get to it. It's Thursday, March 4th, 2021. Welcome to day 44. The Senate voted to open debate on Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief bill. The vote was 51-50, with Kamala Harris breaking the 50-50 tie. As soon as the Senate voted to proceed to the bill, Senator Ron Johnson forced the clerk to read all 628 pages of the bill, which will take hours. Republicans can cause up to 20 hours of debate time and then force an unlimited number of amendment votes. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer dismissed Johnson's efforts to delay, saying that the tactic will accomplish little more than a few sore throats for the Senate clerks. No matter how long it takes, the Senate is going to stay in session to finish the bill this week. Nancy Pelosi, meanwhile, has promised that the House will pass the Senate's version of the bill, despite the limited eligibility for $1,400 relief checks and excluded $15 minimum wage increase. Meanwhile, Stat News says the Trump administration spent about $10 billion in hospital funding on Operation Warp Speed contracts. Congress had allocated the money to help healthcare providers pay for pandemic-related expenses, including staffing, personal protective equipment, and vaccine distribution. And while Congress allowed the Department of Health and Human Services to move money between accounts, lawmakers required the agency to notify them at least 10 days in advance of a transfer. Instead, HHS spent the money directly out of Provider Relief Fund on Operation Warp Speed contracts without making a transfer, which did not trigger the congressional notification requirements. Moving on, the House passed an expansion of federal voting rights over opposition from Republicans. The bill, titled the For the People Act, creates uniform national voting standards, overhauls campaign finance laws, and outlaws partisan redistricting, similar to a bill that was passed 2 years ago which stalled in the Senate when it was controlled by Republicans. The measure passed with a 220 to 210 vote, with one Democrat joining every single Republican House member in voting against it. The bill is unlikely to draw the 60 votes required to advance in the 50-50 Senate unless Democrats abandon the filibuster. The House also passed the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. The police reform bill would ban chokeholds, end racial and religious profiling, establish a national database to track police misconduct, and would prohibit certain no-knock warrants. The legislation would also alter what's called qualified immunity, a legal doctrine that shields officers from lawsuits, making it easier to pursue claims of police misconduct. The bill passed 220 to 212, with 2 Democrats voting against it and 1 Republican accidentally voting for it. After the vote, Representative Lance Gooden tweeted that he had pressed the wrong button and meant to vote no. The House passed a similar bill last year, which failed in the Republican-controlled Senate. Moving on, the Biden administration says it will convert immigrant family detention centers in Texas into quick-release intake facilities, which would rapidly screen migrant parents and children and then release them into the United States within 72 hours. The Department of Health and Human Services, meanwhile, has already reopened a Trump-era overflow shelter in Carrizo Springs, Texas, to accommodate an influx of unaccompanied minors crossing the U.S.-Mexico border. The shelter system is currently operating at 94% occupancy and is expected to reach its max this month. Back in D.C., Capitol Police requested that the National Guard continue to provide security at the U.S. Capitol for another 2 months. There are currently more than 5,000 Guard members currently in Washington, D.C. They're all scheduled to go home on March 12th. The House, however, canceled its session today after Capitol Police warned of a possible plot by a militia group to storm the building. Meanwhile, federal investigators are examining communication records between members of Congress and the pro-Trump mob that attacked the U.S. Capitol. Justice Department officials have assigned more than 24 prosecutors to examine whether lawmakers wittingly or unwittingly helped the insurrectionists. Moving on, the Trump administration referred at least 334 leaks of classified information for criminal investigation, a new record. Under Trump, the FBI also established a special unit within its counterintelligence division to investigate leaks. Very few referrals, however, ended up identifying the leaker or going to trial. Trump's Justice Department also declined to open a criminal investigation into the actions by Elaine Chao when she was transportation secretary. According to an Office of Inspector General report, Chow, married to Mitch McConnell, repeatedly used her position and agency staff to help family members who run a shipping business with ties to China. Chow also required transportation staff to help with personal errands and to do chores for her father, which included editing his Wikipedia page and promoting his Chinese language biography. The Inspector General referred the findings to the DOJ in December 2020, which declined to open an investigation, citing there is not predication to do so. And finally, South Carolina senators added a firing squad to the list of execution methods in a bid to restart executions after nearly 10 years. Currently, inmates can choose between the electric chair and lethal injection. South Carolina, however, can't put anyone to death at the moment because its supply of lethal injection drugs has expired and can no longer be used or purchased. Utah, Oklahoma, and Mississippi also allow a firing squad.
That's all for now. You can find the links and sources for all of these stories on the main website. And as always, visit whatthefjusthappenedtoday.com for the latest news and headlines. Until next time, I'm Joe Amditas.